Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings, reporting including filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. Thank you. Agenda item number 1, do we have any appointment of substitutes, please?
Yes, we do have 2 substitutes this evening. Karen Lewing is here for Tom Petrosky and Councillor Aladita is here for Owen Cleary.
Thank you. So Councillor Shafaz is not here, no?
As far as I'm aware, Shafaz is coming. He's obviously not here at the moment.
Do we have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Any public participation? No. Okay, agenda item number 4, minutes of the last meeting, please. We'll go through them page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Agreed? Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item number 5. Can I ask Tom to introduce the item, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just to introduce, we've got some colleagues from Platform Housing Group with us today. We've got Lisa, Mark, Claire, who I'll be handing over to do a short presentation in a moment. But just to sort of set the context and to introduce Platform Housing Group. We do have a relationship with Platform Housing Group, the council. We transferred our housing stock across to Worcester Community Housing on the 31st of March 2004, so some 18 years ago now. And that transfer agreement's been superseded several times as the organisation's changed. In 2014, it transferred, joined organisations, became Fortis Living, and subsequently became Platform Housing Group. October 2018, which brought together a number of into one larger group. The group now owns around 47,000 homes, and I won't go into any further detail. I'll let the colleagues at Platform talk through more of that. But in Worcester, they own around 5,700 homes, and that accounts for approximately 68% of social housing stock. Given their provenance as a social housing provider, we do have a strong working relationship and strong reliance on those relationships with our statutory obligations as a city council. So that includes our response to homelessness, maintaining our housing register and housing allocations, as well as community safety. So we're very reliant and work very closely alongside those statutory services. And beyond that, there's a whole range of more discretionary services that we work alongside, so community work, and work with other organisations. We don't have any formal arrangement in place in respect of performance monitoring with Platform Housing Group, but we do receive quarterly performance information from them. And that includes a range of performance measures, such as turnaround, repair information, customer satisfaction information. Platform Housing Group aren't based in Worcester, but they have a strong presence and a strong focus towards Worcester, and that's retained since the stock transfer. They offer a whole range of support, which again, I won't steal their thunder and talk any more about that. I don't think there's much more for me to say really, but best to hand over to the platform to talk through
Can I firstly welcome Platform Housing to the meeting and thank them for their cooperation and understanding the need for them to come to this meeting. And can I welcome their representatives? We've got Lisa Fairley, Director of Housing Operations, Mark Mail, Director of Operations, Michael Bruce, Director of Platform Hub and Income, is that right? And Claire Greensall, Head of Localities. Really appreciate your time coming and meeting with us today. As Tom has outlined in terms of, please enlighten us of what you're doing, what you are doing and what you aren't doing, and how, and then we'll give it over to members to ask questions. Can I also remind members to, if there's been points that have been already made, not to repeat them. No personal details need to be talked about in here, so talk about in terms of overall experiences. And if there is anything specific you would like to raise, please raise it after the meeting. You can with them and take their details. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for such a warm welcome. Hopefully all members will have received a copy of the presentation. But I do want to take you through that, talk about the work that Platform is doing here in Worcester. Just Tom mentioned that we don't have a presence here. We actually do. We've got a big office in the centre of Worcester, from which a lot of our employees are working out of. So I just want to give you some assurance that we are very present and active. So the first page of our presentation just gives you a high-level overview of some of our corporate strategy aims, which are very much focused about our customers. We have a strong strand for sustainability, environmental and social value creation. We're very focused on digital, being digitalised, using data to make decisions. We want to make sure that our people are well looked after and that we create a culture of continuous improvement. We want to support our communities and our organisation to add value economically, and we want to be connected with our key stakeholders and partners. Moving on to the second page, you can see that this talks about our localities operating model, and we've moved to a localities model in the way that we deliver housing services to our customers. And the theme of that is to drive a new efficient area of customer-focused local service delivery. And if you look at the visual, you can see some of the things that we're doing with our customers here in Worcester. So we've got a universal offer, which is about how we see things out here, how we support new customers to sustain their tenancy, making every customer contact count, and making sure that they're supported later on. The way in which we manage our neighbourhoods and how we use feedback from our customers to develop our services and take their views into account. That we've got one way of doing things, and that we use customer experience reviews to make sure that our service is continually being reviewed and refined to be the best it can be for our customers. And then we have our community offer. So we have got a regeneration team. We're looking at regenerating some of our communities, and also we're looking at regenerating some communities that aren't ours, but in partnership with local authorities. And we're looking forward to having a conversation with our colleagues at Worcester City about regeneration opportunities here in Worcester. We do virtual surgeries, but we also do neighbourhood walkabouts, and we want to really try and develop our offer in regards to walkabouts so that we can make sure that all key community stakeholders are part of those, and they're as robust as they can be. We do a lot of partnership working, which I'll come on to, and we are also very keen to tackle community concerns, and we also want to make sure that our neighbourhoods are the best that they can be in terms of shaping new communities. We have got bespoke offers. We do give our customers choice in the services that they access and how they access them. We'll come on to that in our presentation. We also, for new customers, are very committed to trying to make sure that those tenancies are sustained. We are very aware of the fact that if people are moving out very quickly, that can destabilise localities. So the investment in time as we bring new customers into platform as tenants is really valuable, because it means that we understand those customers very well and that we can support them. And we also do something called tenancy health checks, which I'll come on to later. The other element of the slide just gives you a picture of our localities. We've got 3 localities. Claire is here today. She is head of localities for the Severn region, which encompasses. Claire has worked for Platform and all its legacy companies for over 20 years. She's a Worcestershire person, and she's very familiar with the environment here. Moving on to the next slide, this covers tenancy health checks, and we use this as an opportunity to review how robust our customers' tenancy is with us. And it's about being proactive and supportive and intervening quickly to make sure that any signs of a tenancy that's struggling, we're providing adequate support, signposting advice, and maximising benefits to customers to make sure the tenancies are sustained. So we do a data review, we look at whether or not rent payments are made regularly and keeping to any agreements. We look for any safeguarding concerns for our customers to make sure that they're kept safe and their dependents are kept safe. We also look at budget concerns and affordability. So we all know the strains on the economic environment at the moment. So fuel, food and furniture poverty are absolutely critical. And again, Michael will provide you with an update on our Wellbeing Fund and how that's working for customers in Worcestershire. We've got a customer portal. We also look at any outstanding repairs. We know that our customers want to talk to us about that. So we want to utilise this opportunity to talk about things that matter to our customers. So we'll scoop that up and try and get those resolved if there are any outstanding issues. We want to encourage our customers to be engaged and be proactive in shaping service design. And, you know, the officer that carries out the tenancy health check, it's about reducing the duplication so anybody can do that. So we're not asking one role to do it. It's anybody that's out in our community that sees that there's an issue, maybe a garden's deteriorating, it may be that they can do a tenancy health check. And it's about our colleagues owning customer concerns and being proactive in the intervention, providing support, and ultimately it's also about sustaining a viable and that those communities benefit from those. Moving on to customer and community engagement. We relaunched our new customer and community engagement earlier this year, and we moved to a new way of working for that customer and engagement team. So on the right, you can see the key strands of the customer and community engagement strategy. On the left, you can see another visual which talks about all the different things that we do with our customers in our communities and here in Worcester. So, for example, on the outer blue ring, we have a lot of people who are working with us, who are customers, who are giving us feedback on the services that we deliver and telling us very clearly what things are working for them and what isn't. So we have got people that are testing new ways of working from a software perspective. So we've had some people work with us on our portal and giving us feedback. We have people review our complaints. They're anonymised, but they review our complaints to say, yes, we think that's a really good letter that you've sent back to that customer who's complained. We have people who are mystery shopping, testing our services anonymously. We have customer sounding board. We have a lot of people, about 150 people on that, where we can just go for quick surveys, where we want to seek feedback from customers to make sure that we're on the right track with what we're doing. We've also got complaint advocates, so customers who support those people who are making complaints. And we've got diversity champions. Moving on, we've got a higher level of governance through our Scrutiny Panel. They've just carried out a review of our void process, and we're also giving them more training so that they are very well versed to hold us to account. We've also got a Customer Experience Panel. They're the very highest level of accountability in terms of our governance structure by customers. We've invested a lot in supporting them so that they're very knowledgeable about the organisation, that they know how to scrutinise and ask access to our board. We've got board members who are on that panel. And we've also spent a lot of time trying to make sure that the Customer Experience Panel is representative of our customers across our geography and the diversity of thought and the diversity of our customer base, so that it's all representative. And in the centre, it's just to reassure you that customers really are at the heart of what we want to do. In relation to next steps, we are starting to look at something called co-creation, which is where we work with customers right at the very beginning of a service change review, when we've pretty much got a blank piece of paper. So hand in hand, we work with customers, small group of customers who are specifically trained to be able to work with us to develop and design the feedback and the data and also the service delivery. Moving on to some of the activities here in Worcester, you can see that this is really, we could have done probably 10 pages of the work that we do in terms of community engagement activities. But this gives you a flavour. So there's been lots of community events. We have a very, very proactive community engagement officer in Worcester who gives up his time 7 days a week really to make sure that our communities are well serviced. We've done 9 projects and events for 22. We've got this week the SB awareness event being held. We've also done some other events, as you can see. There's regular litter picks, drop-ins. Holiday is an area where we've spent an awful lot of time with our customers on the renewal project. That's been ongoing for many years. Digital equipment, particularly during lockdown, we provided an awful lot of equipment to our customers who were struggling to be engaged digitally, especially their children. And we've also supported with mock interviews and other work with schools. We've supported the Worcester Paint Festival, and these are all the other projects as well that we've supported. Moving to the right, we have Community Chest, which is funding that our customer experience panel assess and allocates. So it's not something, we facilitate it, but we don't make those decisions. And over the last 18 months, the project team have awarded 43 projects have been supported through that, and that totals over 57,000. And you can see that we've got over 100 involved customers in Worcester currently, one of whom is a member of our customer experience panel, engagement we have with our customers. 3 members are on our scrutiny panel. I think we've overall got 15 members, so it's a good proportion. And we've got 20 community champions. We've got about 65 overall. So there's, again, a good proportion of customers out in the communities, being our eyes and ears, contacting and working with our neighbourhood teams and also working with our community. The next slide talks about the furniture recycling project. This is something that we're really passionate about. It's something that we're setting up. It's been set up by our Director of Regeneration with the community and also with volunteers internally that care about what we're doing for our customers. We know that furniture is a key issue for our customers. There's a lot of expense when our customers move into their homes. Not everybody has access to furniture. It may be that they're coming from, maybe they've had to flee a property and they're leaving with very little. So we want to support our customers and also the wider community with this community venture. So the aim is to reduce furniture poverty and create social impact. Why Worcester? Because we are, very aware of the fact that we've made a lot of awards in Worcester through our Wellbeing Fund. We see this as an area where there is a need. We want to recycle furniture. We want to recycle some of that from when we get empty properties, where people leave furniture behind, but also source it from other areas. Looking at that, so the base will be in Warndon. And we've got partners as well with Age UK and Men's Sheds. We've got a budget of £10,000 to get this up and running. We've got a number of volunteers that we're really working with them to upskill them and make sure that they understand what our ask is of them. And it's a low cost base. We want to do something that's of value to the community, that the community can access easily, and that we're not expecting people to pay large amounts of access to those furnishings. So we've also got access to a van, a PhD van that will support with that, and we will be marketing that as well going forward to make sure that the community is very aware of this service. And if it works, then we want to grow that and do it elsewhere, but we think this is a really great test space for us to do that. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Michael now, who's going to talk about the next slides.
Thanks, Lisa. Hello, everyone. So I'm talking about the Wellbeing Fund initially. As you can see, we actually started something, we didn't call it the Wellbeing Fund when the pandemic emerged. We called it a Hardship Fund. Everyone was in the same situation. We had a lot of was in dire situations, so we quickly set up a fund. So 2021, it was about £600,000 first year, but we knew from then that we needed to do something more longer lasting that wasn't you know, a sticking plaster. So we came up in 2021-22 with a £1.4 million Wellbeing Fund, and we changed the angle from hardship to emerging out of the wellbeing, out of the pandemic. And we noticed straight away that we needed to support longer term, and it's not just financial awards that the Wellbeing Fund's delivered. So we did spend slightly over 1.4 million, which was got in a little bit of trouble for, but it went to good causes, which was important. But the on costs there were benefits to society, benefits to households, benefits to communities. And it isn't just about the pound spent. We do have a social return on investment that we collate. That has so much more impact on our communities. And also the referrals to our specialist advisors and to our colleagues in other departments was priceless. So for this year, we've increased the Wellbeing Fund. It's now 1.7 million, and I probably should say I'll stick to that, and I'll do my best to stick to that. But it's fast and flexible. It covers a whole range of things, so our customers can apply for things. Most of our requests for the Wellbeing Fund come through our website. Very simple form, very straightforward to use. So just for Worcester City alone, in 21-22, you can see it was nearly £300,000. A lot of, you know, almost 50% of those awards were for food vouchers, energy bill, what we're calling essential items. So we know that people are really struggling. And we want the Wellbeing Fund to be more than just that sticking plaster, but we still will accommodate those essential awards. As we move into 22-23 already, that's gone, we spent £45,000 in this area, and you can see it's jumped. We've got 161 essential awards, over 47 support awards. So again, it's something that we are trying to stem the flow with, but that comes off the back of the cost of living crisis, the energy price caps, and we are seeing our customers are struggling. We see so many referrals off the back of the Wellbeing Fund for people getting their benefits increased and their entitlements checked and making sure that they've got the best energy deals, although that's turning into a challenge. So the platform Wellbeing Fund is a really, really positive story that's supported by our board, and something that we're very proud of, and something that we keep putting out there to get to our communities. So if you ever do get any queries, please either go on our website or get in touch with me directly. The other part is the platform hub. So that's essentially all the customer contact into the group. We are omni-channel. It's interesting to see that probably as a bit of a result of the pandemic, the amount of digital shift in contact that we've seen. So over 40% now. When I first stepped into that role, it was the low 20s at best. Technology is helpful. It is really important to us, and our customers can use that 24/7. We're continually trying to improve our digital offering. We know that you can't stand still with digital. You've got to keep evolving it. People can report repairs on there. They can check the rent payments. They can make check the balance, make rent payments, set up direct debits. So they can do quite a bit of functionality in their own time. They can also put an information request in and ask for anything, and we'll get back to them. And that seems to be really popular. Calls, we still do get a lot of calls into the contact centre, and we're not a switchboard. We are a contact centre, so we do have a first-time fix desire there. So we don't just put people through to different departments. The team are very skilled, and they will complete calls, and as a result, calls can on typical handling be around 12-13 minutes, and most recently they've been 40 minutes as we get to the bottom of what the cause is, but they're not having to call back again. One thing that is really interesting is we have a callback option, which a lot of our customers are choosing to use, and you know, all of those are completed within 60 minutes of that request being made, and just some head time there. The wait time is down to 6 minutes 24, which, you know, I am squeezing to get it lower, and that is a downward trend, and our SLA is positive at 82%. Typically, you can have it a bit higher, but within tolerance. And we've got basically more people in there now, and that's why we're seeing those positive trends in those SLAs. So we are seeing lower call times and more customer satisfaction for that reason. Pass over to my colleague Mark.
Thanks, Michael. Just to talk about repairs, really, as you can imagine, we've obviously gone through the pandemic, and during the course of the pandemic, we absolutely valued the needs of our customers. And so from the perspective of repairs, we always took the view to log any of those repairs, even though we couldn't deliver them because of government guidelines at that point. What that's driven is a backlog of repairs that have built up. It's sector-wide. We're seeing it across a number of organisations delivering services to us. But then, obviously, what we're trying to do now, and what we're obviously being successful on, is reducing that backlog of repairs. It is causing some issues with our customers, and customers are waiting longer for non-urgent repairs to be done. I just want to make that absolutely clear. Our emergency repairs are delivered within 24 hours, 99.9%. So our focus is absolutely on making sure a customer is never at risk in their own home. From a routine repairs perspective, obviously we are attempting to catch up on our backlog of repairs. We do around sort of 15,000 repairs in Worcester every year. So from the backlog of repairs, we're working with agencies, with additional contracting resources, because as you can imagine, we've still got those repairs coming in at the front end, but we need to clear down the backlog of repairs in the background. So we need some additional supports to do that. We're working very much from looking at our own workforce in the first place, looking at overtime opportunities there to get our own workforce to deliver those services. It's 70% of our customers value it as the most important service that we deliver. Absolutely want our guys to deliver. And we ended last year at 85.8% satisfaction rate for our repair service. Whilst it's not our target of 92%, looked across the sector, it's very comparable to other organisations. But what we always value is our own customers. So our drive is to improve that further, whether other organisations are delivering it in a different way. Just pleasing to note that if you looked at the most recent period that we have reported on repairs, we were at 92.3%, actually above our satisfaction rate target. But the reality is our customers are waiting longer. We are putting in plans to resolve that, and we have plans in place, but the current market challenges that everyone is experiencing, obviously this morning it was 9.4% inflation rate, which is affecting our material supplying and the costs of delivery of the service. One of the things that absolutely, from our board perspective all the way down, whilst we understand it's going to cost more, level of service to our customers is something that we don't want to compromise on. One of the things, it's a volume issue that we're dealing with, quality issue. Our quality, and as you can see by those customer satisfaction, are holding their own. It's just waiting longer to get those repairs done. The risks, obviously, for us going forward are we've got an aging workforce, but as you can see from the presentation, if you had a chance to see that, we have a very good apprenticeship programme. It's an award-winning programme that we've had quite a few awards on, and absolutely that's what our value is grow our own talent. There's a 12.5% skills gap that's coming in, hitting the construction industry over the next few years. So the reality is we can have less and less people available to us to deliver our services. So looking at our own talent, developing our own apprenticeships is absolutely key to us, but also upskilling the skills of our own existing teams to be able them to deliver more services through one person. So that's our multi-skilling program. So what we're doing there is obviously giving more skills to an operative so they can deliver more repairs, and so one operative can turn up and deliver multitude of repairs for a customer without having multiple visits other operatives. Our operatives, the higher volumes of new repairs reported impacts of it. So as you can imagine, from the pandemic we've rolled through, some customers have obviously been uncertain about accessing our services. So we did have an impact also of a high volume of repairs being reported to us at the end of those panics where people had the confidence of returned. So that's added to the issue of our work in progress. So from that, we're utilising a blend of contractors, a blend of agencies, absolutely over-resourcing on our permanent staff, and we're a very large employer in the Worcestershire area, and absolutely our ethos, in line with what Lisa was saying earlier, is from a localities perspective. We want, whilst we're a very large organisation, our focus is on bringing our teams closer to customers. So all our operatives are very much sectored into very tight localities. So invariably, customers will see that operative again and again and build that rapport and build that friendly service. As part of that, obviously, from a repairs perspective, repairs isn't the only thing we do. We obviously deliver gas servicing, gas repairs as well, but we also deliver planned programme works. And one of the key things that we need to balance every single day is the level of expenditure we're repairing things to actually is at a point now that it's replaced. So we do a huge amount of investment in capital works, so the larger works, to actually move that customer's home a few steps further forward by new kitchens, new bathrooms, roofs, changes of water services. We've got 6 external wall insulation that we did in the previous financial year. However, that's on the back of a huge insulation programme that we've done in Worcester on a number of our stock, especially in the Toledine area. So we're currently looking at doors and windows and obviously investing in that, because one of the key things for us is understanding our repairs and what our customers are saying, and actually that helps us to develop our programmes, so we're investing our money in the right way when we're doing the capital programmes. Pass you back to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you. We're almost there. So finally, on the last page, it gives you a flavour of some of the collaboration spaces that we are working with colleagues across. It's not everything, but it just gives you an idea at all levels, the level of engagement. CEO meetings. There's involved in a number of things. All levels in all teams. That
I thank everybody for the presentation and the detail that you've gone into. I mean, a lot of this information is available to us in the format that you've presented it in, and it's always useful to hear it firsthand from yourselves into the level of detail that you've managed to achieve in the city. I mean, I'll open it over to the floor in just a second, but I think just to put it in context of where the reasoning behind we've asked you to come here is that a lot of members over the election period were experiencing first-hand complaints around service levels and stuff historically not being done. A lot of us have got personal stories which some will go into at that stage, but the one that kind of stuck out to me, which was a little bit of worrying, was the fact that residents were trying to take things into their own hands because of the repairs weren't getting done. And a simple example was for example, a tree branch obstructing some light going into somebody's bedroom. The person had been onto the phone on a number of occasions. Nothing had been sorted, and it was really, really depressing this person. And this pattern kind of emerged in different blocks in different parts of the ward when we were canvassing, and what we realised that there was a real close link between people's mental health and the service level that they were getting in terms of complaints. And some of these fixes were really simple fixes, just a matter of cutting a branch out of the way, or just moving a bin in the right place, for example, things like that, and that people were getting increasingly agitated, and we were bearing the brunt of that. We were bearing that brunt of that as local members in each of our wards, in each of some of the properties and on the estates that were under your control. So, just bear with us in terms of the questioning. I'll open it out to the floor and really appreciate it. Steve, Matt, Gil. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Thanks very much indeed for that presentation. A couple of questions, please, first. The first one is in relation to your repairs and the way you carry out repairs. Are they triaged in order of urgency, and or is it the order in which you get the repair? And if it is the former in relation to urgency, which I imagine it probably would be, do you have target times for different types of repairs?
I mean, so what we do is we do triage. We use our scripting system. It's within within the hub that Michael manages. Basically, what that will do is lead us down what the actual repair is. Part of that, we would then assess whether it's a priority one, which is an emergency repair, so it needs to be done, or whether it's an appointed repair. What we've changed a period of time ago, our repairs policy to look at an appointment. So giving that appointment at customer, so they're giving the customer a lot more choice about us dictating when that repair is going to be done. So our customers, we always give our appointments at first contact where possible. If we can't, we will give them an appointment for an inspection so they can carry out the work. But normally we look at anything that's non-urgent at 28 days. So we set it aside as 28 days, and that's an industry standard approach. We are looking at that, and obviously we are delivering outside of that purely because we're waiting longer to get repairs delivered.
Thank you. The second question, if I may, Chair, completely different. Really pleased to hear about your apprenticeship programme. As counsellors, we're all corporate parents to our children who are in care. And one of the approaches that we're trying to make is to employers locally to make them aware of issues in relation to the care leavers and what's open to them. Now, not necessarily sort of saying about positive action at all. It is a way forward, but I wonder if you were aware of that situation in the first instance, and if not, would you be open to a conversation in relation to consideration of employing within an apprenticeship scheme children who are in care and about to leave?
Yeah, just before you come in on that, Steve, I think you raised a really good point, and I think one of your colleagues, Mike Johnson, raised that exact point. Our duty as a city council to our care leavers, and whether there is opportunity.
If I may, thank you, Chair. Absolutely, we're very, very committed to our apprenticeship programme. We have a target to on-year increase the number of entries by 2%. We're looking at really trying to create a more diverse range of apprenticeship levels and opportunities across the platform. So, for example, we're going to be recruiting a behaviour coordinator soon. That will be a first for us, and that will be a really robust. But yes, in essence, put that, and we're happy to have a conversation.
Think of Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to firstly start by thanking Platform for the presentation. As the Chair has said, you know, I represent St John's, and obviously St John's at the heart is Dines Green, which has a concentration of platform housing accommodation. And like the Chair, you know, I've experienced many times on the doorstep, where there does seem to be a gap between what is portrayed here, and some of this might be anecdotal, and what people's experience is of sometimes their interaction with platform housing. And I have had to take on issues on behalf of tenants, as we do as councillors, to raise issues. And sometimes, you know, I have found that I contact platform housing and I don't always get a prompt response, or people say, yes, we're going to deal with this, and well, we'll get back to you, but that doesn't happen. And I think there's a general question here about accountability, because there's still this, clearly a decision was made a long time ago now about how social housing should be run in this city. And this is almost a continuation of the discussion we had last time about social housing, how it should be run, who it should be accountable to. And I now accept that we've moved from a council that actually owns social housing to an enabler of social housing. But I'm still very, very big on accountability. You know, who are you accountable to? You know, you're here today, which is great, so you're answering our questions. But as the report says from Tom, you know, Worcester City Council does not hold any statutory powers or control over platform, but has a strong and collaborative working relationship. So, you know, who are you accountable to? And also, there's a lot here about consultation. You know, you pride yourself, which is great, on consulting people all the time. But how effective is that consultation? You know, because if you're not accountable to us as councillors, you should be accountable to your tenants, to your customers. And, for example, you know, do you have a tenants board which has real power? You know, I mean, look, you know, I've worked in the public sector for 30 years in education, and I'm as guilty as the next person running consultations, which, if we're being brutally honest, are not really. They are a box-ticking exercise. And I understand, you know, there's a customer experience panel, there are scrutiny panels, but how much power do these people have? You know, I mean, is there a high level, you know, senior leadership team level of the organisation where tenants are actually placed at that level, where they actually have a real impact, rather than be listened to and there's a consultation and that process is done? But, you know, how effective is that control? Because obviously part of the issue is that platform is a big organisation, and that carries with it certain advantages, which is, you know, economies of scale and so on. But the larger the organisation, sometimes the more remote it feels. And that's, again, something that comes up on the doorstep quite a lot. So, you know, what are we doing to make sure we're listening to the customers? What genuine and effective control do the tenants, you know, the people who live in your houses, who are the most important people, what power do they actually ultimately have?
Maybe a number of us want to reply to certain elements of that, but I'll start if that's okay. So in terms of our governance structure, we have a board, and they are the people that hold all of our business elements to account. They meet on a very regular basis. They receive a lot of information. Officers within the organisation will go and present information to them. So there's a strong connectivity. The customer experience panel are part of our governance structure. So board members sit on the customer experience panel. Our customers that are on our customer experience panel have access to all of our key performance data. We equip them with access to all of that information. We give them support with IT. They have equipment to do that. And we have invested a lot of time in making our CEP colleagues more knowledgeable about different elements of the business. So, for example, we have on our safeguarding Stay Safe group a member of the customer experience panel who meets with us and goes through that. We've also got an awful lot of persons strategy development, dementia-friendly development. So people are feeding into lots of different groups, and that will continue to expand as people become more confident and more knowledgeable. We take that information back and we feed that in, and it links through to our co-creation. Because ultimately, what we're very interested in is the journey of all of our customers when they want some support. Just in relation to consultation, we do consultation at all levels. So we do consultation with our CEP, but we also do consultation on the doorstep when we identify that there's a. And often that's around things that aren't right in the community, social behaviour, or it may be that there's a particular community. We do ask our communities what they want us to do. In relation to Scrutiny Panel, our Scrutiny Panel have just completed a review of our void process. Actually, the chair of the Scrutiny Panel presented the findings of the board, and we're invited to our board. CEP are actually going to be meeting with our board as it is, really, from their point of view. Give feedback anecdotally of what they're hearing in their neighbourhood, the good work that they do and the contributions that they make voluntarily. What we have found is that very often we do get an awful lot of requests for service within the area, and often when we look at it, actually we can't find any record of customers contacting us, that they tend to go straight to the counsellor. We're really interested in exploring more collaboration to ensure that that stops and that customers feel confident in coming to us to talk about issues that they're experiencing. We've done quite a lot of analysis on that, so we would really welcome a conversation with counsellors about the issues that they're hearing from their constituents in their neighbourhoods, and so that we can develop some collaboration and some projects to support those communities if it's feasible.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when customers come to us, I think there's two main reasons actually. The first one is they don't feel confident. You know, I mean, one of the things we have usually as counsellors is because we've had sort of similar roles in our other aspects of our lives, we're confident about dealing with a series of bodies and articulating in a clear and sometimes perhaps more robust and insistent way, in a way that some customers don't feel confident about doing that. You get that kind of customer, and I wouldn't want that to stop. I mean, at the end of the day, as counsellors, we're very, very busy, and the last thing we want to do is encourage more sort of casework than is necessary. But I wouldn't want to put someone off who doesn't feel confident enough to sort of articulate the issue, or doesn't feel confident about, you know, sort of phoning up or talking to someone about the issues that they raise. So I still see us in terms of counsellors being advocates, and I wouldn't want to give up that role, to be honest, because some people just don't feel confident enough. But the second type of customer is sometimes a customer who has tried to resolve it and has not been successful and feels that they are not getting through, you know. And I do speak to people and they say things like, I have tried to contact them, but this has not been resolved. So there's two, you know, I'm more than happy for people to, you know, raise these issues with them directly, but there are some people who will always not feel confident enough to do so. But secondly, there are also customers who feel that they've tried and they haven't been successful, and they turn to us as almost a last resort.
I think it'd be really good to have a conversation about those specific issues so that we can try and pick up and understand that. Really would welcome that. We're very committed to giving great customer service. We don't want any of our customers that they're struggling to engage with us and get the answers that they need. So it would be really good to discuss those specifics in more detail away from
I think I just want to pick up on a point that Councillor Lamb was saying in terms of local representation. I know for a number of years we haven't had local councillors on local boards. I don't know, is that something, any new collaborative arrangements that we are looking into? That will be a possibility.
My understanding is that from a regulatory perspective, that's not. Know that there were a number of part of legacy companies.
I'll have Neil next and then Julian.
Can you all hear me? Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a comment and 3 specific questions. How shall I approach those? Shall I ask the questions in turn, or shall I ask them all at once?
One at a time, I think.
Yeah? Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I agree with a lot with what Councillor Lamb's also said about working with platform and being advocates for residents. But my first comment really is about language. I mean, in the cover report for councillors for this item, it says in 2.1 that on March 31st, 2004, Worcester City Council undertook a large-scale voluntary transfer of its council housing stock to a newly formed registered provider, following consultation with its tenants. So can I make a plea that we use that particular word instead of customers? Councillor Lamb started off ever so well by emphasising that word tenants, but then he was drawn into the word customers, I noticed. So it was okay in 2004, can we stop using the word customers when we could use the word tenants or residents instead, or punters is my favourite one. So that's a comment. The first question is about the sign up for self-service. Do you know what percentage of residents, tenants, punters have access to the internet so that they could take part in a self-service scheme? That's question 1 of 2.
We always do ask our customers whether or not they do have access. If they don't, then we will always. We offer a very flexible approach, dependent on they go out and meet with us. I'd like to think that everybody who gets a service that they want and that we're very
Okay, thank you. Well, linked to that, question 2 is about calls being answered. So if people haven't got internet, presumably they'll try and phone instead. So 82.62% were answered. So what about the percentage that weren't answered? What happens to those queries?
Council for those questions. So some of those will be hang-ups, and some of those will be incorrect callbacks, so they'll put wrong digit in. Marginal number.
Okay, I think you appreciate this question because that's a big chunk, and anyone reading that would probably assume the same as what I assumed, which is platform just didn't want to answer it. And perhaps in future, if you have to give a similar presentation, just say that from the get-go, because otherwise people will point the finger.
Good point. The IVR that we have gives out different seasonal advice as well. It could be a trend on. We could be letting people know that there may be scam calling. Don't call, so they can hang up because they've heard. Oh, that's right. And so there is times when those waits will be directed information, so people hear that while they're calling us and then hang up as a result as well.
Thank you for elaborating on that. One more, Chair, I promise, on this item. There's more to come later in the meeting. Now, I was in Exeter yesterday, so I had no idea how hot it was in Worcester. I read about it, 37 degrees, I still can't believe it. So the sustainability strategy that was devised, 2020, following a declaration of a climate emergency in 2019, is of even more importance than it was 3 years ago. In the presentation, you mentioned improving energy efficiency of the homes that you own. Under the sustainability strategy point 7 for this council, it states that the council will provide technical support to encourage the city's major registered housing providers to submit a bid to the BEIS Social Housing Decarbonisation Scheme. Has Platform submitted a bid for that scheme?
I can take that, yes. Funding. We're on our way. We have got a sustainability personally led. We are very committed to so we are having to spend significant amounts of money. All of the work that needs to be done, but we are very committed to that. We have got a sustainability strategy.
Yeah, thank you. That's good news, although it's one line in the presentation, and given the climate emergency, I think you could give yourselves more credit at a venue like this when most thinking people are freaking out. So if we could have more information in future presentations about what Platform's doing to improve its housing stock in terms of responding to that emergency, it's only going to serve yourselves as well as the residents. Give yourself more credit next time, I suggest.
I suppose on a similar note there, in terms of, we had a number of queries regarding electric charging points, venues and car parks across there.
We do have plans to obviously provide facilities. Certainly in terms of our new homes, we're looking at a platform standard for our homes, retrofitting our existing. So we are consulting with our customers what that looks like for their homes, making sure that all of meeting all of the government standards. Secondary to that will be looking at our existing homes. Built homes over a significant period of time. Very different properties. What our housing stock looks like, what works. But we're looking at all the usuals, photovoltaic, all the things that we need to do. In terms of the charging points, I think, we're all on a journey regarding that. We will be putting charging points in, but we would also welcome collaboration with other stakeholders so that we can do that in a really efficient way for our customers, the wider community, because often in our communities, particularly in our older housing stock, it's not just a platform, it's multi-tenure, so we just need to be really mindful of that.
Thank you. Jill?
Thank you. So, first of all, thank you, presentation. I'd like to say two really brilliant things about the platform. Every of your individual employees that I've met has been very helpful, very supportive, very knowledgeable, and yeah, they've done you credit. Very good. I'm councillor for Warndon. It's one of those areas which is, a little bit. That's nice. So I think also your community and collaboration ideas, very, very good, and your suggestions, Councillor Lamb, I'd like to jump into that, because I do raise a lot of issues on this. So that's great. So a couple of things though. First of all, do you have an IT audit at all?
Yes, we do have an internal audit.
Is it possible to share that or not? As far as insulation is concerned, good to know you've got plans to look at all of that, but given that we are facing a cost of living crisis in the future, what are your timescales for doing the simpler things? Really thinking about whether there's a collaboration opportunity here to put insulation around windows, doors. I mean, I have been going around my ward taking photographs of all the doors that have letterbox flaps missing. Probably been a bit of a godsend the last few days, but once the winter kicks in, that's not going to be the case. So, I mean, those are not necessarily expensive things, but I can certainly tell you in Warndon there's hundreds. So is that something that could be looked at in particular?
I think absolutely. Boiler, but the property is. I think I touched on the window and door program that we're looking at. To those doors. But what I would always say from the customer perspective, if you've got missing parts to things.
I don't know what's going on with that. So the other things then, there are many issues that come to my attention directly, as you were saying. This is an afternoon in Warndon, just one afternoon. So this is linked to the environment, fly tipping, some of it antisocial behaviour, some of it, I think there is perhaps an element of fly tipping tourism going on as well, time to time. The point really being, I reported a particular instance of a fridge during the campaign. As far as I know, last week it's still there. So I don't know how to actually escalate those matters beyond what I already do. It would be good to have, I think, certainly from time to time and on the day that I took those photos, to actually have had a massive clean-up very quickly would have been very beneficial, because once an area thinks that nobody cares, more people don't care, and it just gets worse. The other issues that I get are around extreme distress or other sorts of antisocial behaviour. Drinking, partying, use of communal spaces inappropriately, sort of hogging them, keeping the community out. And then, of course, the old favourite maintenance, you know. I wanted to know about your emergency route for repairs. So you decide yourself what's an emergency. I've just been dealing with a particular resident who's been without hot water for 4 weeks now with a young child. So I don't know what would put that higher up your emergency list, but that's just, anyway, a general question.
There's quite a lot there, so I'll take some of that. I think some of the points that you've raised. Just in relation to fly tipping, we have actually spent over 43,000 last financial year in Worcester City alone. I think everybody's aware of the fact that fly tipping. Beyond that, often it's community fly tipping, so we do remove an awful lot, and we're very committed to doing that. But equally, we would welcome a conversation and some further collaboration with Worcester City around how we can address it. So, for example, in Birmingham City, I'm aware of the fact that they've introduced a mobile collection service, and I think there's real value in that, because that is, as you quite rightly say, that can be something that can be targeted and be very proactive. Sometimes people leave white goods out because they've paid for things picked up because they're not in the collection service expect. So there are a number of things, but I completely agree with what you're saying, that they do really create problems within communities. Some of the things that are fly tipped, we're able to go through and establish who may have fly tipped. And also sometimes in communities that are multi-tenure, they're being fly tipped not by. So there's that to take into account. In terms of antisocial behaviour, we have a specialist team who are our community safety team, supporting our officers. And we do get an awful lot of complaints that come into us. So just for example, in Worcester City alone, we've had 618 complaints that came in for that, so it's about 11% of our. We also investigate hate crimes, and we have 6, which is about 0.1%. We also support customers who are fleeing and experiencing domestic abuse. We deal with property condition as well. We had a total of 919 overall, 221 were in this. So I just want to reassure everybody that we're being very proactive in addressing complaints of antisocial behaviour. There are various reasons sometimes why we can't take action, but we are very committed to partnership working. We do a number of neighbourhood walkabouts. We're very committed to local policing teams, and we have a very robust process that's embedded. And we also do sense check internally on social behaviour complaints. As part of one-to-ones with officers, we investigate them and we look so that we're constantly on a learning journey with our colleagues. So in relation to specifics, very happy to have a conversation with you. But I hope that does give you some reassurance about the numbers that we investigate, and we do survey all of our cases when they're closed. We survey every single complainant and ask them how they felt that we're on a journey with that, but actually for July we've had definitely not something I think we will sustain, but 100% of those people that responded said they were happy with the way in which it was been happy with the outcome, but the investigation they felt was robust. Oh, that's it.
Specific issue. Obviously, I'd be interested in the
Yes,
issues
of course,
about
of course.
case, but just to give you some understanding of, we do create within our system hot water during the summer months doesn't become an emergency, and we obviously communicate that out to all our customers to say that it does change in the winter periods. Absolutely, it is. But in relation to vulnerabilities of customers, we always have that option for every single one of our repairs to turn it into a more get it done. We do not have a backlog of gas repairs at the moment, so I'll be interested in understanding that specific issue.
Could I just ask one more thing? Is there any plan at some point for the platform to work on proactively improving communities? So there's a lot of green space that you mow, for example, that would look much better with wildflowers planted and that sort of thing, you know, and it wouldn't necessarily cost a fortune, but I just wonder, is that anywhere in your plan? Because as soon as you, again, you make a place feel better, everybody feels better.
I think we're very open to conversations with communities about what they would like for those communities. We have done an awful lot of community grounds maintenance improvement. So we've done that through our community chest work. We've put benches in places where the community have asked for it. And we have got a number of community allotments, community orchards, community gardens. So we're very open to having those conversations through our community engagement officers. And again, we can start that conversation in Warndon and elsewhere if that's something that the community or we very much welcome that.
Thank you. I've got Karen next, and then I've got Stephen and
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and for coming tonight. Very comprehensive. I've just got a couple of questions. Firstly, my one is actually about what you just said about residents, if residents request something. I think there are some base things that residents should have without requesting them. For example, I've got some housing in my ward that's got no external shade. So during this hot weather, those residents have been confined to their apartments and not been able to go outside. Now, to me, you shouldn't have to wait for a resident to say, please can we have some shade? Please can we have some benches? They are fundamental to every site. So I wonder, do you do site audits where you have a kind of minimum standard of things that should be part of that site? So you've got a certain number of benches in a certain area, you've got some shade, you've got some bike parking. I've got a resident who has somebody come by bike, they've got nowhere to look it. So it's that kind of consistency of approach across all your sites. That's my first question. My second one is, in the opportunities repairs, you've talked about elevation of lettable standard to future-proof the standard of existing properties at point of letting. Now, I recognise this as an issue in my ward where people moved into properties which they didn't think were acceptable. And I recognise that that was probably during COVID and you had issues. So I completely understand that. But could you explain what elevation of lettable standard is? Is that you are raising the standard of what you are expecting, or that you haven't got one? I don't, do you see what I mean already? Or what is it that you've got? So example is, should a resident have a carpet, hot water, blinds, curtains, furniture if they don't have any before they move in? Or, you know, is it that you have to put people into houses because we haven't got enough homes and people are desperate for the homes and you can't quite keep on top of it? Do you see what I mean? And then my third point was really, has been raised by a number of people, and again, this is about consistency of your approach to energy. We've got a lot of residents who are on low income, and the cost of fuel is enormous for them. Are you upfront with residents when they move into a property that perhaps their property, when you're buying a house or renting a home, you get the EPC rating. Do people get that information when they move into a property so they know how much they're going to do? Do you ever get residents turning one down because it's too much, you know, and they prefer to go somewhere else? They prefer to wait for a cheaper, you know, and I can see this becoming more of an issue. You know, somebody will say, actually, with the rent and the energy, that isn't somewhere I can actually afford to live. So I concur with what other councillors are saying, that actually I really think this needs to be an even bigger priority for you. But thank you for the work that you've obviously done to quite a lot of your housing stock already. Those are my points. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll just keep them those three. You do raise a good point in terms of actually EPC ratings and housing waiting lists. Actually, if somebody is offered a housing, offered a house and he refuses it on the basis, he or she refuses it, or they refuse it on the basis of a poor EPC rating, what rights do tenants have in terms of them not being offered another one?
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly frank, I can't recall a time that would have happened. Registered providers' properties are generally significantly better performing in terms of energy efficiency than privately rented accommodation. So then turning it down on that basis, it's unlikely that with a high rating would come up in reality. I think what we'd probably do in that type of circumstance is speak to them and try and discuss their concerns and discuss whether there was anything around affordability that we could support them with to ensure that they could access that accommodation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll cover some points and then pass some to my colleagues if that's okay. But just in relation to the point that Tom's just responded to, we do advertise our properties with EPCs and we have to, by law, provide a copy of an EPC at each point. So all of our customers are also, through the pre-tenancy work, we do an affordability assessment with our customers to make sure that the property is affordable to them. We also do talk to people about whether or not they can afford them, where the evidence is leading us to assume that they can't actually, they've not got enough surplus funds at the end of that affordability check to demonstrate that. We also do, in terms of carpets and other goods, we don't as standard provide all of those goods. So on occasion we do, because we see that there's about real value in that. So carpets, curtains are sometimes left in properties, but equally sometimes we do leave them in properties because we think that they're really for our customers. Then we have to go to the additional cost of removal. Also, we're very mindful where customers are. So where we're able to show new potential applicants around in a pre-tenancy setting, we do speak to them about whether or not they would like to. We do offer a bespoke service for them. And Michael can probably come in here and talk about the Wellbeing Fund and the work that the Wellbeing Fund does to support our customers.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's invaluable. We do understand that people do situations where they can't afford, if you can imagine the outlay, removal truck, van, whatever. Setting up home is not cheap. Majority of our customers tend to other homes, so they bring that with them, so the cost isn't great. However, we do have a lot of working with the city council, are coming out of temporary accommodation, the violence, and we will, the Wellbeing Fund is one of the great things that it does. It helps people on that starter journey. So we do some really good stuff with white goods, flooring, you know, pots, pans, fridges, those types of things, washing machines. Clothes, you know, you can't go to a laundrette if there is one locally. As you've mentioned, public transport's not always available or accessible, and you know, if you've got a vehicle, it's always straightforward. So the Wellbeing Fund really does, and we've seen that plug that gap, and we're proud to say that we'll be having that fund for many more years to come.
Just to respond on to the lettable standard, we do have a lettable standard which we apply to all our homes, so it has to meet that. We obviously do inspections of all our homes. 100% of our homes are fully inspected before they are released. What we are looking at as part of our platform standard that Lisa mentioned earlier is whether we need to look at enhancing. Our customers' expectations change, and we need to change with them sometimes. So we are looking at whether we need to enhance some elements of our properties to meet the need of obviously our customers moving into them. But what I would also say is we're a one-product business. Our properties are our key, and so obviously making sure that product is the right product is absolutely key to us. That's why we're focusing on that.
Just conscious, Councillor Lewin, that you asked about aid and bike stores. So we do really try and provide as much as we can for our customers in terms of bike stores. That's a big factor of our new schemes that we develop. In relation to our legacy scheme, we do put that in where the community they demonstrate a need. But we are really keen to make sure that we're not imposing our decisions on communities, but hand in hand with those communities. So if they do want to do that, we do have our community engagement. We will work with them to make sure that they get as much as what we can deliver or our stakeholders can deliver in partnership with us as well. It's about being the customer voice, being the centre of what we deliver, and it's about being customer-led as well. Where people do want it, sometimes there's diversity in views across different areas where some people are in agreement. We do the consultations as well to try and achieve some consensus and achieve a happy medium as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
I do. The first question is fairly simple. COVID has affected supply chains in quite significant ways. And there is a shortage of building materials, I understand. How has that affected your ability to do repairs across the group?
We work with a number of partners that we've got a very robust supply chain. What we're seeing is we did have some issues with some specific materials, such as roof tiles, timber at one point during the pandemic. However, because of we work very closely with our supply chain partners. Travis Perkins is the one that we work with in this area. They provide us assurance that they can provide it, and we're not seeing any real issues with supply. But what we're seeing is an issue of cost, where those materials are becoming.
Right, that's the first question. The second question is, I was in the Warden part of Worcester several months ago, and came across residents in the 3-storey blocks of flats and that, and they weren't particularly happy with the property they had because of a number of flaws. One is the windows had condensation matters on them. Second one is the structure of the building themselves have internal concrete walls, which are apparently very, very poor in terms of, controlling the heat in those houses, in that they're very cold and expensive heat in the winter, and in the summer they become unbearable. Now, when I first got involved in politics in Worcester 30 years ago, over the side over in St John's, I had these flats called the Waits flats, which were built in the 1950s, and they were absolutely terrible. And, the then government had a programme called Estate Action. Thankfully, they disappeared, and they're no longer there. I would suggest that these particular type of properties, and we do have a few of them around Worcester, are basically now at the end of their lives, right? Yes, you can do things to improve them and that, but they're probably getting to a state where probably demolition and rebuild is probably a better option. Do you have plans in the pipeline for such projects like that? Because that is really, really what we need. Some of this substandard housing, in terms of its structural thing, old, it's obsolete, and it wasn't particularly built well back then. I noticed with council houses, if you look at them, houses that are built in the sort of 1950s beforehand were actually built really, really well and can be really, really well modernised. but some of the ones they built later on are sadly not particularly good.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think what I would say is obviously with some of our legacy stock, when they were built, they were built to the building standards of those times, and so they were built correctly then. However, obviously with the changing modern environment and obviously the pressures on running and the environmental costs of running these properties, and we would always do an evaluation of our property stock anyway. We run a system called the shape model, which looks at all the fabric of the building, how it's heated and everything, to do an evaluation of whether it can be moved to C, which is our target. So we would always look at that stock first to see if we can actually retrofit items onto that stock to keep it going. But if that is unavailable and we cannot achieve the government target, then we would obviously look at whether that is property is suitable for us in the long term and our tenants.
Councillor Tisser.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's very useful to, and thank you very much for, I think it needs to be frequent rather than maybe the COVID bit is caused us more grief than we attend to. But nevertheless, for my sins, I was it depends who you speak to, transfer to the housing stock in my sort of tenure. But personally, I think it's done wonders from where we were to now. But there's always room for improvement, as you would alert to the journey. A couple of questions. One is, then I'll make a final comment. One is that right to buy is something that we had triggered. I just want to know a little bit about that from you.
In regards to right to buy, do you want to know how many properties we've lost through the right to buy since we did the housing stock? Is that the question?
Sorry, I want to be a bit more clearer. I think the third policy was that we, the stock that we sold, the tenants had the right to buy. I just want to follow up from you. What is the current policy from yourselves? Because that's okay. that sort of leaped away when the third sort of some of the councils gave that share away. Anyway, I won't go into that. But what is the moving forward from your point of view? The tenancy that you issue to new.
Yeah, I'll let Claire come in there.
Okay, so if you're a new customer to platform, you don't have the right to buy. You may have the right to acquire, depending on the type of funding used for the property. So the number of customers, tenants, punters in Worcester that now have the right to buy is diminishing because those tenancies are coming to a natural end. People are ending their tenancies, passing away. So you will only have a full right to buy if you have a consecutive tenancy from stock transfer all the way through to now. So quite a long time. So in 2021, there were 16 right to buy sales or right to acquire sales that went through, and they were mostly houses, 2 and 3 bedroom homes with 1 bedroom flat.
So I think the gist of it that you don't renew right to buy is deceased basically with the old transfer, or are you still saying that you continue it?
So there are no new tenancies with right to buy privileges, if you like, unless the government changes their policy. We were part of the voluntary right to buy, but that's a separate piece of legislation.
Thank you for that. My understanding was that, but I just wanted to clear it from yourself. But the last one is that, well, there's a couple more. One is that we were very taken about community engagement. I think my sentiment would be a sort of advice, free if you can. Invite the councils when you do invite community engagement. It might be an email or something that you can circulate. It might be a useful tool for them. And also, I think if they have issues and problems with tenants, they can air them with that. And the other bit of correspondent thinking was that between us from the City Council and CPA, whether we can do a joint venture for fly tipping because that is increasingly a problem, not for your residents as well as the city council. So it would be nice to do a joint up thinking. As I spoke to you earlier on about the, some of us are here, are dual-hatted, have a county as well as a city. So when you have a lovely landscape and you finish your tenure, and then all of a sudden somebody comes and digs it all up, it's not a very nice tenure to see. So if it could be a joint up thinking, it could be the city fibre coming along, or somebody else, or the main electric or gas, or county are doing the football repair. It would be nice to try and joint up if you can. I mean, it's sometimes very, very difficult, but ideally, you know, if it's a possibility that we can circulate information when you are developing a new site. Thank you for that.
We will absolutely invite you along and to neighbourhood walkabouts as well. And we also hold something called Communities Connected. It's something that we do across the whole of Platform. But we, as colleagues who work for Platform, are expected to and want to participate in doing community clean-ups, doing environmental projects, doing some really big pieces of work. For example, our senior leadership team are going to be doing some work collaboratively at one of our older person schemes to make sure that some of the fabric of the building is changed to make it more accessible for what those residents are. So yes, we will get in touch with you about that, and if you would like to get involved, will you be
Chair, just the last one. I'm sorry, Steve. It was the matter because some of the land is jointly, some of it's county, some of it's city, some of it's yours. So that's where I'm coming from. Rather than, you know, people see that and say, you're all council, so why don't you, you know, it is very difficult, but it is possible to do a joint up thinking. Thank you for that.
Okay. Lucy?
Thank you for that. Some of our wards don't have many platform housing, particularly in our wards, or we might have got them or something like that. Can we also be included in the community walkabouts and that sort of thing in our area? Because I don't really think, certainly I'm in my ward, I don't think I ever am. So,
yeah, most definitely. We'll be in contact with all of members to see if they would like the events that we run.
Thanks. I think for a really robust questioning and debate on this. I've got a couple of final points. How many empty properties do you have at the moment? There's in terms of stock that's not being taken up, or stock that's being converted or yet to be repaired to put into a fit state. The reason I'm asking is obviously we've got a massive housing waiting list within the city, and one of the questions that we constantly get asked is about empty properties and putting them back into use. Appreciate this probably more refers to private landlords rather than housing association providers rather than
Don't have the information to hand, but certainly find out. Aim is to pre-allocate so that when the being ready to let properties are let very, very quickly. So the team are very proactive. I can certainly find the data out.
And do you have a who's who and who to contact within each ward for the problem? Is there a chain of command that we can establish?
Yes, most definitely. We can make sure that you get that the point of contact and how you
can. Okay, fantastic. So I'll just sum up then. I mean, I think members, as I pointed out, have been both respectful but robust and challenging in their questions today. And I hope as a result of it, we are able to sort of forge new links and a renewed commitment to work together to find solutions to some of the long-standing issues that some members may have had, and any new ones that kind of emerge. And it was never about holding us to account, but understanding some of the reasons behind why platform do what you do and how you kind of go about it. And because of that disconnect over the years and losing, our voice, I suppose, on that top table in terms of that, there has been an increasing disconnect, hence why the majority of the reason I can probably safely say why tenants contact us is because they feel that they're not able to get through to you, or the response times aren't quick enough, or they need they've come to the end of the line in terms of any other options regarding that. And I think it's that that possibly kind of needed, and we're well aware of the effect of COVID and what effect that's had on you in terms of the case build-up, and hopefully that can slowly be addressed. It'll be really good to have that clear line of communication between us and yourselves, and so we know who to approach in what circumstances. I think there's unanimous consensus amongst the group here of the outreach work you do and the great stuff that you do out in the community. And often it's those people that we have that relationship with, and those are the people that we're constantly contacting. Who do I select to contact about this? Because they're let's face it, some of them are our colleagues, some of them are we've known for years, and we've built up those relationships. And it'd be really good to build some of those relationships on a consistent level with some senior management, and that we can pick up the phone to say, hey, this is something happening in our wards. Long-term prospects, obviously the housing report that's come out from ARC in terms of building those relationships and building a board of operation in terms of our long-term strategic operations within the city, how we're going to deal with our housing crisis and our housing waiting list, and that joined up thinking within our planning departments, within our economic development, and within our communities. So we're all on that same page. So I hope that we can take it as if I forgive the pun, that we've given you a platform to build a stronger relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We really have definitely.
Fantastic. Really appreciate your time here. Thank you. Did members want a 5-minute break? Yeah, we can just have a comfort break then, yeah. Can I ask members to take their seats, please? Thank you. It's 5 minutes, so I'm just going to crack on. Item number 6 on the agenda this evening is Museums Worcestershire Annual Review. Thank you for being patient, Philippa. I'll pass it over to you, shall I?
Thank you, Chair. For members who aren't aware of the Museum Service, Museums Worcestershire is the joint museum service for the City Council and the County Council. And here at the City, we look after the Worcester City Art Gallery and Museum and the Commandery. We're overseen by a joint committee of 4 members from the City and the County, and we feed into this committee. So I'm bringing here today our annual report from 2021-22. I'm going to give you very much a highlights tour because I know time is quite tight tonight, but obviously I'm very happy to answer questions on any further bits that I don't talk about in any detail. So if you don't mind, if I sort of direct you to where the pages in the report where I think you'll probably find the most interesting things. If I start you on page 14, which is the second page of the annual report in colour. So to start off with, to remind you that back at the beginning of 2021-22, we were still in lockdown and museums weren't able to open until partway through the year. And I'm so pleased to be able to report that we're in a position where we're almost back to 2019 numbers again. That's not the position across museums across the country. So I'm very pleased that here in Worcester we've really beaten the record elsewhere to be able to bring people back into the museums and the benefits that's able to give them. I think this photo on this page is actually really sums up that kind of recovery from COVID that we've been going through. It's from a project that we've been doing called Suitcase Stories, which uses historic objects to bring reminiscence to people living with dementia and their carers. And you can see from this that this is Sue from the museum's team working in a care home, having to work with the residents in the care home through the screen. So we really tried to do absolutely everything we could to make sure that we were bringing the benefits of working with museums out into the communities throughout the time when we weren't able to open the museums themselves. So if I then take you back through a little bit further down onto a little bit of a highlight about the Commandery. So that's the next page on. One of the things I wanted to flag up is that we've been able to start a new school session this year. Formal learning has been very much a key part of the museum service really for a very long time. And COVID did give us a significant blow to it, but there's been a real positive to that, is that we've been able to review what we do, review the take-up, review with our teachers what it is that is most useful for them to take on. And really learn from the pilots that we'd done before COVID to start new sessions. I'm very pleased that we're now back actually with increased numbers this year from where we were back in 2019. It's clear that there's a changing demographic of schools that now come to museums, so we're going to be learning a lot, I think, as time goes on. But it's really interesting to see that we're using that story of Worcester as a significant place in the history of democracy and starting to share that with the schools that we have here in Worcester. And then if I nip you on a couple of pages on further to the Art Gallery Museum to talk about our most successful exhibition last year, the Titanic Honour and Glory exhibition. It was so successful, we had the busiest May and June on record, which, given that we were in a position over that time of needing to make sure that visitors were spaced out within the space, was a challenge, but also something we were incredibly proud to achieve. We've been now having a series of exhibitions over the summers that are particularly encouraging to engage families and really have a bit of a pop culture reference. Obviously the Titanic has a historic story, but it's also very well known as the connected to the film. These are great exhibitions because they bring in a high proportion of first-time visitors, both here in the city, but also from much further afield. So Titanic brought visitors from as far away as Cheshire and Kent, London, across the whole of the Midlands. And so that was great because we were bringing visitors into Worcester who might previously not have known of our city, but also we're bringing in local visitors who previously might not have thought that the art gallery was something that was for them. And hopefully that then gives them the confidence and the interest to return to future exhibitions as time goes on. I think the Titanic exhibition was a great one to have post-COVID or in that COVID recovery time. It was a chance for families to talk together about some difficult issues, about loss and survival, in a much more friendly environment, in a way that was very disconnected from, I guess, their day-to-day living. So I think that's a really important progress that we needed our visitors to go through at that point. Now I'm going to take you quickly on through to page 20 to flag up some of the particular programmes that we worked on across our communities. Over this year, 2021-22, we brought in about a quarter of our budget in external funding, which enabled us to run a whole series of projects with a whole series of partner groups across Worcester. And I'm particularly pleased that we were involved in the Holidays, Activities and Food programme, which was particularly about giving activities and lunches to those eligible for free school meals during their holidays. So we did it over the summer and over the Christmas holidays, and we're continuing it over the upcoming holidays. What was so lovely for us was that it really worked particularly with our hyper-local audience. So at the Commandery, that was really the ones within, you know, hundreds of yards of the Commandery. And those are probably the visitors that come to us the least, because actually the Commandery's been set up as a space for destinations from further afield. And those communities very close at hand really do need some of the benefits that we're able to give them. So that was a really great opportunity to be able to do that. We've been doing, as part of that, we did some evaluation on their well-being. So we asked them at the beginning of asked the kids at the beginning of the day how they were feeling and how they were feeling at the end of the day. And we saw significant changes over that time. So to be able to make that much difference in our very, very local families' lives, I think is something to be very proud of. And then on the page after that, it talks a little bit about how we've used our collections to work with communities. So we work with quite a lot of community groups of partnerships with specific collections drawn from the city's collections in various different projects. But I wanted to flag up specifically this project, the Glove Affair, that we've been doing over the last couple of years now. For those of you who don't already know, Worcester has an incredible history of making gloves, making and selling gloves, and indeed it was at one point, you know, a significant majority of the city's residents were all involved in the glove industry, and we have the most important glove collection in the world, something that Worcester should be very proud of, despite the fact that it's an industry that's disappeared now. But what we can do is we can use that collection not just to be a static display, but actually to work directly with groups. And we've done that very much over the last couple of years. We've been working specifically with people who used to work in the industry and get to use their voices so that we actually interpret it in a way that works best from them. But we've been able to use that collection to reach out to groups that don't often come to museums. So this is particularly groups of elderly people that are at risk of isolation. We've worked with foster children, looked after children, children in care, and with Ukrainian refugees using these collections. And these have been something that really has shown the power that historic objects can have that reaches over language barriers, academic barriers, all of those things. Everybody can understand something positive that's come out of working with those historic objects. And then I'm going to nip through several pages and take you on very much to the last bit that I'm going to talk about, which is on page 28. So that's to talk about our looking forward. So over this last year, we have set up a charity alongside the museum service. So this doesn't run the museum service. The museum service stays exactly through as it is, as a council service. But this works in partnership with us in order to raise funding for us to undertake various projects that we're able to do. And we've been supported by particularly one very important philanthropist as part of this, but we're bringing on board more as we've gone on. And really, we're about to head into a period of development across the city museums. We're starting that off with Towns Fund investment, which will move the Worcestershire Soldier Gallery and create a new one for that down at the Commandery, and enable us to create new permanent displays at the Art Gallery, which means there's more for people to be able to see, more particularly for local residents to be able to see. And I hope that that's really just the starting phase of developments that we're going to have over the next couple of years. I'm going to leave that at the end of the report unless members have any questions.
I'm actually on the Joint Museum Committee. I was the chairman up until May, because the chairman each year is either the county council or somebody from the city. And I'd like to just thank Philippa and her staff, because the last couple of years have been really, really difficult. And even with COVID, you still were able to get the museum to the people in Zoom meetings and that sort of thing, digital. And the fact that we've had this fantastic donation and all the things that we are going to do with it as well. And really, I think the museum service is probably in its favourite place. But perhaps I'd like to ask Philippa, what do you think her favourite part of the year was?
That's a very difficult question. That's like having a favourite child, isn't it? Actually, I think I'm most proud of the where we've worked specifically with collections out in the community. I think that the power of the Glove Affair project has really shown to me, which, I mean, you know, I have 25 years behind me of working with these. I should know this already, but has shown how small things from the past can really make a significant difference in people's lives, and we shouldn't underestimate the power that those museum collections have, be it actually in the museum venues or used in a much wider way.
Thanks, Lucy. Councillor Stephen Hodgson.
Thank you very much. Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for hosting me at some of the exhibitions you had during my mayoral year, and I was certainly very impressed with the Titanic exhibition, which I think is actually one of the best ones we've had in Worcester. I mean, I've been to the Titanic in Belfast. I've been to the one that's now opened in Southampton, and I'm hoping to go to the one in Cove in August. So you know, I've seen quite a few Titanic exhibitions, and the Titanic has such an evocative feel about it, and things like that actually get the visitor numbers up. And the important thing with that, I would guess, is getting the footfall into that building, because when people see what else there is there to have on offer as well, and then word of mouth, that really helps. So in terms of the Titanic exhibition, what sort of footfall did that actually attract?
I think it was about 12,000 visitors through the summer months. As I say, the most successful May and June we've had since our records began, which is certainly about 40 years now. So something to be very proud of over that short length of time, particularly as we were needing to limit our number we could have in the gallery at any one time.
And just one other thing, as a curiosity, how do you get an exhibition like that to come to Worcester? Do we have to compete against other town cities and their museum services to get that? And actually, generally speaking, how successful we are in terms of, you know, getting exhibitions? And you don't reveal too much, but have we got some exciting stuff in the pipeline we can actually look forward to?
Yes, so it's not quite a competitive process. It's not that we bid in as a tender, but there is a lot of negotiation that happens, and actually even more than that, there's a real professional skill to network out there to find the right people to work with who have the exhibitions that you can bring. I mean, the other thing that is worth members knowing is that there's a real juggling that goes on with budgets as well. We have a relatively small exhibitions budget over the year, and we probably triple that through external funding in order to bring the exhibitions that we have. Which leads me nicely to our most exciting exhibition that's going to happen. Our current exhibition is extremely exciting, particularly if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. I would really encourage you to come and see the excitement of moving dragons and so forth that are in the gallery at the moment. But our next exhibition after that is going to be an exhibition of Canaletto, and this is probably our most ambitious traditional art exhibition that we've ever done. And we've levered in considerable amount of external funding in order to make this happen, although it's still quite a challenge to make this work. But we're hoping that that's something that not only is an exceptional exhibition in the space, but we can really use to build our partnerships. We have projects alongside it with the University of Worcester and Hereford Art College art students, and to reach out specifically to a lot of the young people in the city that are learning about art and how that can relate to their practice themselves as they go forward.
Thank you, Stephen. Matt, and then I've got Karen, and then Jill.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, like a lot of people over the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of staycationing, and it means I've visited a lot of regional art galleries. The rest of the UK. I was in Leicester last weekend and went to their museum and art gallery, and been to ones in Cambridge and Colchester and Norwich. And what's great is what we have in Worcester just compares so well with all of those. I mean, it really is. We've got an excellent collection, and obviously the visiting art exhibitions are great as well. Picking up on the final point you made about your presentation, what's the estimated date when it comes to the successful transfer of the Worcestershire Regiment Museum to the Commandery? Okay, so when is that likely to be finished? Because again, I think that's a wonderful exhibition, having been around that a few times, and I think it will really sort of increase the number of people who can see it by moving it to the Commandery. So when's that going to be completed by? And how much more capacity will that free up in the existing art gallery museum? Because I know for a fact that we have a huge sort of amount of art that only a fraction of it can be shown at any one time, purely because of the lack of capacity. So how much more capacity is there going to be once the Museum of the Worcestershire Regiment moves out? And I think I asked this last year as well, but is with the increase in working from home, and obviously at the bottom of the art gallery, which used to be the library, that's used by council workers at the moment, is there any plans to move those out, and perhaps it's a question for officers, and really exploit the huge potential of the whole art gallery and museum, because it really is a very big space potentially. And the final thing is just a reassurance, because when I was in Leicester Art Gallery last week looking at the German Expressionists, it was free, and I think one of the most important things about art and culture is it is accessible and it is free. So I hope when financial times are difficult, there's always the temptation to sort of put in even a notional kind of sort of charge, but I assume there'll be no charge for any museum or art gallery exhibitions in Worcester.
Okay, I'll try and take those from the top. Please remind me if I've missed one as we go through. So at the moment, the Worcestershire Soldier takes up about a third of the exhibition space at the museum and art gallery. And you're absolutely right, it's a very good display. It's coming up to 25 years old now, so it's got a level of datedness to it. It really needs updating. But it's going to be a real asset at the Commandery. It makes a lot more sense there. It fits much more closely in with the story. It's a little bit disjointed in its space in the art gallery. The intention is that happens towards the end of 2024, with the opening in the beginning of 2025. That's our aim as we go forward. I know that feels like quite a long way off, although there's a series of work that needs to be done. Really, we're not talking about just picking it up and moving it. It's about, as I say, it was 25 years old. It's about creating a new display that makes sense for contemporary audiences. So there's a work to do to make sure that it's right. What that leaves behind us is actually quite a significant amount of space, as I say, about a third of the space of the museum and art gallery. And you are entirely correct that, well, the city's collection is about 1 million objects in total, so there's a significant number that aren't being on display. But particularly within that, there is some very fine pieces of art that spend more time in other museums than they do in our own, and really that's not right in my view. That it's also the point that most of our visitors, or most of our feedback coming from visitors, will often say is, well, where's the art collection? So there's also some really strong stories within that collection about the importance of Worcestershire, particularly within the kind of the story of art history that we're not telling. And that sounds quite an academic way of saying it, but actually there's some gorgeous things there that really, you know, the people of Worcester deserve to see regularly and be able to come in. And I would hope that we can be quite sophisticated in how we put that across, particularly as time goes on, as we can develop it more, where we can really talk about, 100 years ago, we were a city where if you were a working class kid here, you becoming an artist was encouraged. It was, you know, you could see there was a career behind it. We should be proud of that as a cultural city, and I want to see that we can find a way that that story then goes deeper and wider across that whole cultural landscape that we have in Worcester. The difficult one on charging. So I don't think any of us ever want to be in a position to be charging for the permanent collections at the Art Gallery Museum. And what I would actually like to do is increase the permanent collections, increase what's available, so that they are better, there is a lot more to see, there's an awful lot more opportunity for the people of Worcester to see their own collections. Temporary exhibitions is a different matter. It's now a normal model for regional galleries to charge, well, indeed national galleries to charge for their temporary exhibitions. And I'm afraid this is to do with the fact that they tend to be very expensive to put on. We are currently in a position where we are talking in the low thousands of exhibitions to put on, whereas if you are talking to, say, Compton Verney or something that we would consider equivalent, they have budgets of hundreds of thousands for each exhibition. If we need to be in the same audience circle as that, we need a business model that stacks up. The way of doing that is to look at how charging comes in. But I don't want to think of that charging is part of a model that means we are a barrier to people coming in. There's a lot more barriers to coming into an exhibition than the price. And for us, the key bit of looking towards that would be looking at how we work specifically with things like teachers, with community group leaders, so that we're talking not just about a free ticket, but also about, well, why, what would you gain out of coming to this exhibition? Why is this exhibition for you? I think as much of this is we don't want to be in a position where people see Worcester Art Gallery as being an elite organisation that isn't something for them to go to. So that's where I think that we want to tackle that across the board.
I'll come in on that point, Philippa. I mean, where do you see Worcester pitching then, in terms of, I mean, what do we need to get a top class exhibition here? Is it about financials, or is it about the space being fit for purpose in terms of accommodating it? I mean, where do you see Worcestershire museums in 5 to 10 years' time? What level should we be pitching? You know, is there too much competition on a regional level for the bigger exhibitions? Are we just not able to compete with them on that basis?
Unfortunately, I'm going to say all of the above, although some of that is about making sure that we prioritise where the strengths are. Because we do have strengths, we've shown that we are able to bring in visitors from across the country, and we need to continue that strength, I would say. There are problems with the infrastructure of the Museum and Art Gallery. There are definitely areas that are quite neglected. And really that needs to be a priority for the city. Well, it is a priority for the city to be tackling, to make sure that there are ways to fund, you know, the basics of lifts, toilets, cafes, the things that make you want to return to a space over and over again. There will also be needs to make sure that we up the exhibition space, the quality of that as we go on, as we move on to the more sophisticated lenders, to moving to the National Gallery lenders. The demands are higher. I mean, my team were in the Museum and Art Gallery until 3 a.m. the other day because of the fact that we needed to make sure that the site was secure. There are elements of that means we're suddenly working at a different standard than where we were before. And that takes capacity, it takes intelligence of staff, and it does take budget. I think we're all in a position where we know that there is unlikely to be significant additional funding for the city for revenue funding, and so we need to use the capital funding that we can lever in intelligently so that we can make that revenue model work long term.
Councillor Blue.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this. It's, one thing that I really appreciate is the fact that a lot of your stuff is so creative for people. Actually, that has been going down in the city as we've had other places and not being able to offer those opportunities for children. Wonderful. And the quality of your exhibitions are just stunning. And I know this is all wrapped up with balancing the books, but I know your opening hours, you do close at 4:30. And I do wonder that sometimes in the year there might be, I know you have some late opening nights for certain things, but whether it's the summer holiday, whether it's Christmas and it ties in with the Victorian Fair, maybe your cafe staying open later, linking to coffee culture a little bit more, is there an opportunity to actually get more people in? I know that if you work full time, you don't possibly have that much opportunity to go to the exhibitions and perhaps actually spend some more money in your shop and in your cafe. We could actually, like, you know, build the revenue a little bit more if you could open your hours a little bit longer.
It's actually on our work plan this year to review our opening hours and to see whether we think it needs adjustment. There's no doubt about it, our demographic has changed over the post-COVID time, and I think you're absolutely right. We're probably now, our majority of the audience maybe do find it harder to get to us between 10:30 and 4:30. And I think we need to find a way that we could follow that through. And it's interesting that you pointed out the success of our evening events, particularly over the summer. We have one a month, and actually the last one was last Friday, and it was our most successful ever. So clearly we're starting to grow that audience now. There's no point in doing it sort of like once and then go, you know, nobody comes in and you assume it doesn't work. It's about growing that audience through. So it is absolutely very much on the agenda that we look at that over the upcoming times. There's a pressure, I think, from many people to look at Sundays as a potential other opening day, because the Museum and Art Gallery isn't, whereas the Commandery is. But actually, I think I would agree with you that maybe looking at an evening one day of the week might be a more appealing for our audience, and so that's something we need to talk to our audience about directly. And those that don't come yet, to find out what would make them be able to come, or help them be able to come.
Yeah, I went to see the Titanic exhibition. I really enjoyed, and what I thought was really brilliant about it was the way you tied in local people who had worked on the ship, travelled on the ship, died on the ship. I thought it was, you know, quite remarkable. Much more interesting as somebody even new to Worcester. Another thing that I've noticed, I don't think I saw much of it there, but I have been to the potteries, yes, and they have great little exhibitions where people talk at you, you know, and say, so the person who was the main artist, say, patterns on the plates, just give you their little potted history of what their life was like. Just wonder whether that was something that you'd consider expanding in your future exhibition.
So we're looking at this particularly at the Commandery at the moment, not quite in the same way, because clearly we don't have the people who fought at the Battle of Worcester still around to talk, but in a similar way that, and particularly when the Worcestershire soldier goes down there, there's a real opportunity there for that direct connection with, and actually veterans or you know, recently serving soldiers can be very inspirational, particularly to teenagers. There's something specific that can get out of that multi-generational relationship there. So that's something we've been particularly looking at, but we're building up our volunteer base. Almost always these people are in a volunteer capacity. We're building up our volunteer base across all of our sites, really for that specific one-to-one conversations that can be had. But I mean, our staff who have all of the responsibilities for money and evacuation and safety, and it's harder for them to be able to have those details that are about sharing experiences. And the Glover Fair project is a great example about that, as how we've really unlocked a lot of those conversations with Worcester residents that have made them think, oh yes, actually I'd like to give back through something that we do. So there's a real opportunity to take that further.
Do you have any other speakers on this? Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not something you necessarily associate with museums, but the suitcase stories. I've seen the impact when they've been absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it can be a bit of a tearjerker there, that one, you know. But the question I was going to ask was about the, I mean, going on from that fantastic donation that the museums had, you talked about and lay the foundations for a new gallery within the foreground. Do you have any sort of time idea on that at all? And are we talking knocking down walls or using the space that should become available? Thank you.
So initially, I'm going to say we're not talking about knocking down walls, but that's not to say that there might be a plan to be more sophisticated as time goes on. One of the issues we have at the moment is our art gallery space is relatively small, and the moving of the Worcestershire Soldier really opens up not just the opportunity for a new art gallery, but the opportunity to be quite flexible about how we use that space. So, but that starts to be more creative in how we use the space. So initially, it's really about creating a new art gallery to display the collections that just have not been able to be shared with Worcester residents, and we'll get more creative as time goes on. So as I mentioned before, the intention is that the new Worcestershire Soldier moves to the commandery at the end of 2024, and we would look for it not to be closed for particularly long, because initially I really just want to make sure we get those spaces open and are able to show the collections. So we're really talking about initially a make good to create it into a space that really then is showable for art, and I would hope that in early 2025 we would be able to have that open then.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers on this? Well, what can I say? It's an excellent report and a fantastic year that you've had. You know, there's a tremendous amount to celebrate and to be proud of. You know, nothing, I suppose, sums it better than what Councillor Hodson's written back on the back of the report, to be honest with you. It is remarkable how Museums Worcestershire quickly pivoted to find new ways of working during the pandemic and are now building on this to take the service forward. Hard work has led to swift recovery, but not at the expense of partners or communities who remain at the forefront of the service. Work and ambition. Well done. Thank you. We have item number 7, Homelessness Annual Review. I think this is being presented by Tom, and thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the opportunity to bring this paper to the committee. I think homelessness has featured a number of times, even within the short space of time that I've been working for the City Council. And I know it featured significantly before that as an area of interest for members. So the purpose of the report, it's the first time we've drafted an annual report to bring to committee. And the primary purpose really is just to try and bring the topic of housing, homelessness and rough sleeping into a single document to hopefully help inform members around the work of the Homelessness Service, to sort of give insight and an indication of the demand and the activity that the Homelessness Service undertakes. I desperately tried to keep the actual report succinct, and it ran to 18 pages. That gives some indication of the extent of the work and the breadth of work that's undertaken around this area and the priority that we give it. There isn't a statutory legislative requirement to provide an annual report. We do a number of returns to government around our operations, but I think it is a useful document to have reference and something that we hope to take forward moving forward. Just to draw attention to a couple of points, and I won't go through the report in any great detail, and hopefully everyone will have an opportunity to read it in advance of the committee. Been a funny couple of years, as everyone knows, and that has impacted on homelessness and changed the way that the services had to operate, but also in terms of what we've seen and how people have presented to us. This past year, 21-22, we have had an increase in homelessness approaches, so more people have contacted and accessed the service. Prior to that, it was relatively stable, but it's gone up by a few hundred people contacting the service. And then the nature and the reason for presentation to the service has changed. Traditionally, it's always been very much driven by people's private rented short hold tenancies coming to an end, served with notices by their private landlords, and that shifted over the past couple of years, with the primary reason being family no longer being able or willing to accommodate. That's always featured highly. It's always been one of the key causes of homelessness, but we have had a shift. And one of the biggest changes and impacts of that primary presenting cause of homelessness is that it's often crisis driven, so it's often people presenting on the day, they've been kicked out, there's been a relationship breakdown within the household, and they need accommodating immediately. The difference with the short ending ASTs and being served with notice is that we have a greater lead time and a greater opportunity to prevent that homelessness. There has been quite a shift change in the nature of presentations and how we've had to respond to that. Rough sleeping is often people perceive homelessness. It's the most visible form of homelessness. It does come with one of the highest risks. People not having any shelter or any accommodation. It is actually one of the smallest portions of homelessness presentations. It's for a significant volume of homelessness in its broadest sense, but it is one of the most acute elements of homelessness. We do have some entrenched, embedded rough sleepers within the city, as well as a much greater number of more transient people, whether they're from Worcester or the area or surrounding areas or much further afield. We're seeing a lot more challenging cases presenting to us, both in need of housing, whether they're homeless or just applying for housing, people with many more multiple and complex needs, with their own individual needs as well as circumstantial presentations, and that places a lot of extra resource and pressure on us. It often involves working with a range of different agencies and making much more highly individual and bespoke responses to those individuals. Past couple of years, we've had a range of different interventions as government have supported homelessness provision during the COVID pandemic. There's been schemes such as Everyone In and Protect and Vaccinate, giving us an opportunity to accommodate people. There was funding available to accommodate people that we may not have otherwise necessarily owed a duty to, and that gave us real opportunity to work with those people to access accommodation, moving on from there. Temporary accommodation is, I suppose, the fail-safe, so where people have a priority need, we will place people into temporary accommodation. Numbers fluctuate, but at the end of March 2022 this year, we did have 68 households in temporary accommodation. We recognise that that's far from ideal. It's not what we want to be doing, but part of the pressure of that is around the supply of accommodation and the opportunity to move people on, which we always do at the earliest opportunity. We've had previous delegation of authority to secure some additional units of accommodation for the use of safe houses, in particular for domestic abuse. We're just going through the process of procuring those with the registered provider to increase that specific provision for that cohort of people that are presenting as fleeing domestic abuse. Demand, as I've mentioned, is significantly higher than supply. So at the end of March this year, we had 2,500 applicants on the housing register. In the same year, we made 439 allocations to registered providers. The number of applicants is ever increasing, but the number of allocations that we're able to make become available doesn't increase in line with that. So the picture is we do see an increase without a corresponding supply. Prevention has always been a key priority and the sort of key approach to tackling homelessness and responding to homelessness. So wherever possible, we will endeavour to prevent homelessness from occurring in the first place. That's not always possible, and quite often people present as already being homeless, and that's where our relief duty kicks into play. We never turn anybody away, so we'll always consider people's needs as they present. We try and prevent tenancy failure, so we work closely with registered providers such as Platform, as we heard earlier this evening, as well as the other providers. And we're looking at increasing the provision of that ourselves, so how we can look at before tenancies commence, particularly if they've had tenancy failures previously, how we can provide further support and advice, make sure they're clear about the expectations that will be placed upon them. We're looking to increase our delivery of more individual and bespoke packages of support. So we recognise, particularly with rough sleepers, it's not simply the case of offering them a flat or a place to go. That's been made multiple times, and that's not the barrier to the accommodation. It's often a lot more complex than that. So part of that is looking at what the underlying cause of their homelessness or rough sleeping is, trying to address that, but also look slightly more creatively about how we can tackle that, and looking at that on a much more individual basis. But that's probably a good point to stop. There's a great deal more in the report, and I'm welcome any questions.
Thanks, Tom. I think it's important to note what we're trying to recommend. What we're recommending here in terms of that, and in particular 1.3, that the committee endorses the proposed allocations of resources, and particularly concerning is obviously what's potentially around the corner in terms of fallout from the cost of living crisis and the emergence of, well, we're heading straight into a recession, and all the fallouts as a result of that. So, just I hope that you can bear that in mind when having a look at this. How the resources that we're allocating, are they being allocated with those things in mind? And I'll open it up to the floor. I've got Councillor Lamb and Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. I mean, I suppose the question is there's two questions here, really. One a strategic one and one more sort of technical one. Carrying on from what the chair's just said, I mean, how high do you think the demand is going to go? Because obviously we've had COVID for the last 2 years. Now we've got the cost of living crisis. I mean, it was so worrying to hear the head of Lloyds Bank say about 2 weeks ago that he reckoned that most of his customers had less than £500 worth of savings. And we've got interest rates going up. And the anticipation that to choke off inflation, interest rates are going to continue to go up, which makes mortgages more expensive. You've got talk about the bubble bursting in the housing market. It sounds very much like the early 1990s with sort of negative equity, and that then pushes people who are already on a cusp, very much a cusp of it only takes a little change in their finances to push them into homelessness. So how how far do you think we're going to go in terms of the demand, and what things we put in place to sort of anticipate that? And secondly, under 4.6, with the allocation of homelessness prevention grant, there's this role here where it's brought forward from 21-22, the outstanding cost to cover young persons housing solutions officer role. Was that budgeted but not filled? What's the reasoning there, where it's been brought forward from 21-22? It's £5,000 for the outstanding cost. Third one down in the table on 4.6.
Yeah, so the Young Persons Housing Solutions Officer was a county-funded post. So it was to cover the additional costs. Officer, which we still have in post. We recognise that is a priority area of work for us, and they're extremely proactive in prevention work in particular around that cohort. The demand is almost the impossible question in some respects. I think we all recognise the pressures on significant proportions of the community around the cost of living and how that is likely to impact them. It is very difficult to sort of foresee exactly where that will be, but we are working to try and identify opportunities to mitigate that impact. As I sort of mentioned, prevention is always our priority, so where possible, we're encouraging people to contact us for support as soon as possible. We work with the range of other providers across the city, so if they're approaching, for instance, a DWP, struggling, requesting that they're making contact with us so that we can provide support and intervene if it's around their circumstances. We work with private landlords, so if it is an issue around affordability of the rent, we'll try and intervene at an early opportunity to see if they can offer a period of grace or support that we can offer. But it is a concerning time, and I think it is something that we are keeping a very close and watchful eye on, any impact on the homelessness service. But in terms of knowing exactly how that will look is...
Sorry, very briefly, just come back on that. I mean, you know, sometimes when we talk about homeless people, some stereotypical images, don't we? I mean, has there been a change in the kind of people seeking support from you in the last couple of years compared to what might have been there before?
Emma might be able to comment more, slightly more informed, but not particularly. I mean, I think in terms of the demographics, so age is stayed relatively stable. There has been the shift in the nature of presentations, the nature of people coming to us. We do see the highest proportion of people presenting as homeless as a sort of middle-aged group. We've got some anecdotal sort of understanding of why that may be. There are the relationship breakdowns. There are those who will have accessed accommodation, and then that sort of breaks down. But not particularly. There doesn't seem to be a particular increase or change in terms of owner occupation or private rented or social housing providers. We work with registered providers, so with Platform and others, on prevention panels with somebody facing the risk of homelessness through them. But we'll engage with them and look at opportunities to work with them to prevent that from happening. Once somebody's made homeless from a social housing tenancy, that it's your sustainable accommodation moving forward.
Yeah, I'll take Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom, for the report. I've got a question about the report itself and a question about the covering report. A bit of a preamble before I get to the first question. I'm reading this great book called Plunder of the Commons by Guy Standing. It's called A Plunder of the Commons, a manifesto for sharing public wealth. Just the sort of book you'd expect someone like me to read. I just thought I'd highlight a couple of important facts from this book, given what was said earlier by Councillor Ditter about right to buy. As of early 2018, this is published 2019, as of early 2018, just under 2 million council properties in England have been sold since the right to buy was introduced in October 1980. I think it's really important to mention such a fact at a meeting like this, which might be watched by members of the public, because that's important context for the housing crisis that we currently have in this country. It all dates back to Thatcher. In 2017, the government passed the Homelessness Reduction Act, which obliges councils to do more for the homeless in their areas, yet at the same time it cut the funds available for housing services for vulnerable groups by almost 70% between 2010 and 2017. Again, I think it's important to highlight the context that you as officers and we as councillors have to work in. We've got greater obligation to help homeless people, and yet funding has been taken. The question I have, page 15, said that it's anticipated that grant funding will be greatly reduced by 22-23. Is the homelessness prevention grant from central government, and pardon me for my ignorance if it is, and how much is it going to be reduced next year? That's a question for the substantial report. I've got one more about the covering report.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, the reference to the reduction in grant funding is primarily because there's been so much additional funding over the past 12 months, largely a result of the impact of COVID. So there's a breakdown of all the funds that we received, which some directly relate to homelessness prevention and intervention, such as the homeless prevention grant. There's specific criteria of how that can be allocated. But there's also things in there which, such as the discretionary welfare and assistance scheme, which may not be directly related to homelessness prevention activity, but certainly assist people who are in those greatest needs and may prevent them from becoming homeless by funds. A fair proportion of the total funding did come from COVID-related grants. So we had the Protect and Vaccinate scheme, where we were given grant funding to be able to fund temporary accommodation, for instance, for a period of time. So the reference to the reduction in grant funding is primarily around that additional funding. That was the context that was meant. The homeless prevention grant for this current financial year we're in has gone up since last financial year by around £10,000. The total amount of homeless prevention grant has been ring-fenced, so we know what that's going to be in totality across the country over the next two further years. However, the government are in current consultation around the criteria of how that will be dispersed. So they currently operate a fairly historic methodology for how that's calculated and who gets what. So we're currently have consultation around a sort of update to that. There's a couple of models that they've developed, and both of those look like they're going to be more favourable for Worcester. So hopefully we will see an increase in the core homeless prevention grant. We won't know for definite until that calculation has been undertaken. So hopefully that core budget will increase or at least stay the same. Beyond the 2 years, we simply don't know what the national allocation of homeless prevention funding, we don't know what that will look like or how much that will be.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. That sounds a lot more hopeful than that line on page 15 that funding is going to be reduced. So, and obviously, when you get the information, it'd be good for this committee to find out what's going to happen 2 years from now. So the question about the cover report, in terms of, in relation to 3.2 in particular, about the service receiving 1,871 approaches for homelessness assistance, the team accepted 337 prevention duties and 490 relief duties where prevention could not be achieved. Again, pardon my ignorance, it might just be a terminology thing, but why were some applications not taken? And again, apologies if you have gone into more depth in the actual report itself, but I didn't catch that.
Yeah, no problem. I think it might cover in the report, but I'm happy to clarify that point. So quite frequently, people might contact and approach us and say, I'm homeless, but they're simply not, and we're able to just intervene, and we don't need to take a homeless application from them. So we certainly don't gatekeep or try and prevent taking applications, and we always take them where they meet the eligibility criteria and it's warranted. If nothing else, it would help our prevention statistics if we were to take them and instantly prevent them. But very frequently, we're able to establish that they're not homeless, actually. They've got somewhere to remain, and therefore we don't need to take a homeless application. There's other approaches. So, for instance, a care leaver, we don't need to take a homeless application from them because we can automatically apply the top priority banding from them. So by taking a homeless application, it doesn't achieve more than that process would do, and only slow down the process, if anything. So we try and take a more pragmatic approach. Some people will contact us and then just drop off the radar and don't pursue their application. So that's the discrepancy between the difference between.
Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the context for homelessness as well. And obviously we've had an absolute mental health crisis of lack of investment in the government have put forward a draft bill in June to recognising the fact that there's been complete lack of investment, and hopefully this will pass through Parliament quickly so we can see some action taken on behalf of. In your report, you do recognise that there is a demand for larger properties that currently isn't being met, and I'm wondering whether there's any proactive action being taken to provide some larger properties for those families. And also in your report, I may have missed it, but I couldn't see any reference to wheelchair users or disabled persons. So do we have people who have, different needs, extra requirements, do we accommodate?
Yeah, so in terms of larger properties, I mean, I've sort of highlighted in the report that demand for 4-bed in particular or more is fairly significant. Financially, 2 4-bedroom houses. So the reality is that if people have that need for larger accommodation, it simply just isn't there in the city. So it's a recognised issue of undersupply in particular. So where we work with registered providers who are looking to build additional properties, that's one of the things that we'll factor in and stress the case that we do need those additional units of accommodation. So we do make that point. We do try and encourage and influence registered providers to build those additional larger units when there's particularly on larger sites that they're able to. So that does happen, but it simply isn't meeting the supply and demand. It isn't the only demand, so it's always a fine balancing act between the greatest proportion, and there's been a fairly large shift with lots of people needing 2-bedroom houses. So following the Welfare Reform Act, lots of people needed to downsize, so where people were occupying 3-bedroom houses, there was a bit of a shift and greater demand placed on 2-bedroom houses. But it's to recognise an under supply of 4 beds or larger, significantly poorer. So that's a picture that's recognised. You would see that across. Fortunately.
With regards to disabled applicants, we do have a proportion on our waiting list who need disabled accommodation, adapted accommodation. And that's identified through the medical questionnaire that they do. Then we will have accommodation that comes up on them that has already been adapted, maybe for other people, may have stair lifts, that kind of thing. So we'll always try and match those. Obviously, the adaptations, they might need other ones as well, but if there is a stair lift there and there's someone who match those, rather than ripping out a stair lift if there is one in social housing. So also we do have temporary accommodation, which the council owns. We have some adapted recently, and within that we made sure there was some disabled adapted accommodation, and there's charging mobility scooters, all of that kind of thing. That was something that we lacked previously, so that was something we made sure very useful.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. From paragraph 3.5, where we talked about the influxes of roughly, it appears that Worcester themselves must be getting things fairly right in some ways, because obviously people are coming here. And it just takes me back to the very first point in the background at 2.1, where it says the City Council has a statutory duty to prevent homelessness. I'm just wondering, is that exactly correct, or is it that the city has a statutory duty to serve? So, you know, should the sentence really be reading to provide that free service as opposed to preventing homelessness as such?
Yes. Yeah. So we have a duty to provide advice and assistance to prevent homelessness. So it's probably slightly broader than the specific prevention of homelessness. But the 1996 Act, which that came from, has been superseded by subsequent legislation. So the most recent sort of relevant legislation, if you like, is the Homeless Reduction Act 2017, and that revised and changed the way we approach homelessness quite significantly. So it broadened our responsibilities around prevention and relief duties fairly significantly beyond that. Yeah, the point on rough sleeping, yeah, I think part of the challenge is that we do see a great influx, and that's partly because of the services and the offer that we provide in the city. It's a safe place, it's tolerant, it's where people can come for help. So I think we do an influx because of the services that we do provide, both the City Council but also partners.
Yeah, thank you. Because I think that's the point I was getting at, really. The fact that that's what the Act says is about providing that free service and that free information. It's obvious and apparent that that's what's happened, I think.
There's 2 points I want to raise in terms of this. Is that one, in terms of obviously rent protection, evictions, protection from evictions, and the fact that actually I'm really worried about housing stock and availability of that. What efforts have we made? I know over the pandemic period that housing officers were contacting private landlords for ways to house those people out on the streets, and help wasn't very forthcoming in terms of that. As the cost of living bites, we know already donations and people's philanthropy is decreasing as people tighten their belts. and we're becoming a little bit less kinder, in terms of that. Ask the food bank in terms of their donations. So I think we're really facing a moral crisis here in terms of housing, and I don't think that we've got enough stock here to possibly to deal with those evictions that are possibly coming. I mean, I need to be reassured that this committee needs to be reassured that we're doing everything we can to ensure that all our available options are available for people in Worcester.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of limitations around residents, there is a local connection criteria to access social housing in terms of maximisation of housing options. It is something which we're regularly doing, try and encourage private landlords to come forward with properties. One of the biggest challenges in Worcester is affordability, both supply but also affordability, particularly in the private rented sector. When we make an offer, if somebody's approached us as homeless, we can't discharge duty into the private sector if it's not suitable accommodation. Part of that consideration is affordability, which is obviously increasingly pressured. And I think that's something that we're going to have to consider increasingly moving forward. So where we may have historically considered a property to be affordable, that may no longer be the case, which will put additional pressures. But we are considering all avenues. So through the enabling work that we're looking at, we are in conversations with registered providers around increasing provision for a longer term solution. But we do liaise with providers regularly to try and access that accommodation. However, people aren't moving, that property doesn't become available unless. So it is a
Well, can you reassure the committee that the available housing stock will be given to Worcester residents first?
Yeah, so we've got an allocations policy which we have to comply with. Part of that allocations policy does place restrictions on local connection criteria to Worcester. Where people have connections elsewhere, we'll encourage them to apply elsewhere. But if they don't have the local connection to Worcester, then they wouldn't be eligible to access that social housing in any event.
If we're all happy, the points, recommendations in 1.1, the committee notes the content of this report. 1.2, the committee note the contents of the annual homelessness and rough sleeper report. 21 and 22, and 1.3, that the committee endorses the proposed allocation of resources. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Tom. Final item that we have is the Q1 performance report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm conscious of the late hour, and I would normally take it as read, but I'm conscious that within the appendix to the report, there are a number of red performance indicators. So, very quickly, projects and actions, they are either green or amber, so on track, completed, or slightly behind schedule, and there's narrative provided for those. In respect of the key performance indicators, there are a number there that are red. There's one around Find It, Do It Worcester, and I'm intending on providing members with a written update as to why we are red for that one. There is no narrative provided with it. The number of affordable housing completions, that's an annual indicator, so probably shouldn't really be showing a colour at the Q1 stage, but there is narrative there to show that against the target for 200 properties a year, we've currently completed 21 within quarter. Percentage of HMOs licensed, we usually target ourselves at 75%. I think we're sort of mid-60s. We've had some resource issues. We've lost a key member of staff. We're looking to replace that as soon as we can. We're also catching up with a bit of a backlog from COVID, so that's the reason for that one. Percentage of people owed a main housing duty is slightly higher than we would like, but conscious that out of 170 people, only 22, we weren't able to rescue, for want of a better phrase. And the total number of nights in bed and breakfast accommodation is higher than we would like, but obviously that is linked to the fact that we need more temporary accommodation, and members 18 months ago approved us on a journey to try and find more. But thankfully, we are green on the number of children placed in B&B accommodation, which is a real sort of no-go area for us. So a bit of a skip through, Chair, but conscious of time, happy to take any questions.
Okay, we'll open it to the floor. Councillor Lamb, then Councillor Lawrenson.
Yeah, on the one about the total number of HMOs licensed as a percentage, forgive my ignorance, but if you run a HMO and it's not licensed, what, is that unlawful? Is that illegal? Or is it, because your target here is 75% of HMOs should be licensed. So is there a legal duty for a HMO to be licensed?
If it's licensable, there are some HMOs which don't require a licensing, and we get this query quite regularly at committee, and my knowledge is that this is 75% of those HMOs that we are aware of, and there's always this element of churn within the city where some HMOs fall in and fall out of the system.
So sorry, just to go on from that then. So what action is taken against, there's two things here, isn't there, really? There's HMOs that we know but aren't licensed, and there's HMOs we don't know about, because of course there's the word suspected use here. So what action is taken against those HMOs which we know are HMOs which aren't licensed? And what action is taken to track down HMOs that we suspect might be HMOs?
So Tom's private sector housing team will pursue landlords that haven't licensed their HMOs. Maybe that will be brought about by statutory notices or prosecutions. And then in the background, there's a piece of work where the team, they will trawl newspaper ads, they will work with council tax, they will look at various different routes to try and keep on top of that churn element, Councillor Lamb, those ones that fall in and out. So there is work that goes on in the background as well.
Okay. Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lloyd, for the report. I know it's late, so I'll crack on. Start with some positive announcement. Wednesday Lunch Club, one of the projects that's been supported by the Community Support Grant. Brilliant news. And I was guest of honour a few weeks ago, and I'm looking forward to my next free lunch in September because of the new cooker that's been bought. So council doing good things. Just want to praise the council for that. Also, community events supported, page 7. That's brilliant news as well. But I've got one question about that and another question about tennis. The question about community events being supported. When I got back from Exeter, I checked my emails, and I had an email from someone saying that the council was charging the club that they are a member of to use public pathways. And I'm not going to name the event because that wouldn't be appropriate. But I'm concerned that they've been told that the council wants to charge them a small fee, whereas in previous years they were allowed to have the event for free. So can you assure me that question one is, can you assure me that the council is not going to be charging clubs, societies to use public land? Question one.
Councillor Lawson, I think the best I can do is if you can forward me the details of that individual case, and I can look into it. But I don't think it's in the spirit of what we do as a community engagement team to be charging people for use of public open space. So I think I can safely say that.
Great, that's great to hear at this meeting. Yeah, I'll relay details. Thank you for that. Page 17, I think it's page 17, about Freedom Leisure exceeding their participation target for tennis. So I've learnt this evening that in 2 weeks last month, Freedom Leisure enabled people to play tennis for free, which is great news. Are they going to carry on doing that? Because cost of living, pandemic, people want to be active now. Are we going to extend free tennis to residents in Worcester through Freedom Leisure?
So there's a core offer of free tennis outside of that 2-week window. Every single week there is a vision of a set number of hours for free tennis. And that was extended probably 12 months ago in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of this committee at the time. This 2-week provision of tennis was something that we bolted on top of that, just to try and build on the Raducanu effect. So absolutely, we'll look at the results, we'll look at the outcomes of it, and if it's something that we feel is worth doing, which I think it's going to be, we'll absolutely do that again.
They've equally been to the Richard Udall effect. Councillor Lucy Hodgson.
I think one of the questions we're going to ask simultaneously, but find it, do it in Worcester. Why is it red? And why isn't there any sort of explanation as to what it's all about?
So sorry, Councillor Hodgson, if you didn't pick it up at the outset. I said that I'd provide a written note for all members on that particular indicator. So I'll get that in writing to you, because at the moment I don't have that information. So apologies for that.
Carrying on from Neil's conversations around community events supported, there was plenty of an explanation around community events that we financed, but why is the dotted line and the green line, why is it in April only 51? It's going up a bit in June, but last year in March sort of did over 500 odd events. It just seems a very strange curve. It really does, and it's a green.
I'm looking at the March for last year, and you're absolutely right, that's showing as 142 events. So I don't know whether that's linked to coming out of lockdown. I think it may be. So there was a real sort of outpouring of people wanting to get out and start doing things again. But again, I can clarify that and include that in the note if that would be helpful. But I think because of the numbers involved, it would be very difficult to go into any huge amount of detail in what is supposed to be a very high-level report for members to monitor. But again, I'll feed that back to the team, and we'll,
550 down to 51. Huge.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
That's really what it should be more. Thank you. Sorry.
Good, thanks. Stephen?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question actually. It's just really a comment really about the actual shape of the curve, because if you look back to a previous year, it obviously April has obviously been low, and then it then creeps up towards February, then just this drop, and just understanding why we have this drop, because it's actually not just this year, it's the previous year as well. So just to expand on Lucy's question, but I have a general question about some of these indicators. we've got some which are in red, but the targets, for example, seem to be quite modest, like percentage of homeless prevention is like our target is 30%, which seems to be quite low. And there's other ones as well, where for example, homeless relief completed target is 50%, right? When we exceed targets, do we review these targets and increase them in order to push for further improvement on there? And also, the other question is, if we don't succeed a target, are we actually putting resource and effort behind that to get these targets fulfilled, or are we using just this as a tick box as an exercise?
So I think just to clarify question, when these two brighter gentlemen and me have confirmed that the reason it drops off is that because we reach the end of the financial year and we start again in terms of counting. So that's the reason for the drop off. Question two, absolutely, you know, we keep our indicators under review. There's quite a few new indicators in this performance report, so I think they still need a bit of tweaking. And you know, the reason that some members may feel some of the targets are modest around homeless prevention, it's a tough job. We haven't got lots of property to put people into, and some of the cases are very complex. So that's why we're not sort of shooting for 100%, because we know in many cases they're very difficult to resolve.
Other speakers on this item? No. Can I recommend that the Communities Committee note the Council's Q1 performance report then, please? All in favour? Thank you.